Hello, hello, one and all, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm your host, Connor Rebush. With me as always, or not as always, is Phil McKenzie, who's got a fresh, new sound.
Hello.
Oh my god, I heard the H at the beginning of that word, I heard the E. Practically every letter came through on this new mic you've got, Phil.
Smooth and mellifluous. Mellifluous.
Oh, great. All of his flubs are going to come through loud and clear.
My excuses! No!
That's right. It's a dawn of a new era in Heavy Hands. Unfortunately, that is not the case for the UFC. Perhaps, or maybe it is the dawn of a new, worse era. I don't know. It feels like Twilight. Both like the astrological phenomenon and the movie / book series, which is very bad. Anyway, we had, the UFC's modern day attempt to put together a network TV card. Remember those Fox cards, folks? They were pretty good, weren't they? You looked forward to them. You were like, this is practically going to be a pay-per-view. Well, the UFC on ABC gifted us a Jairzinho Rozenstruik main event, along with a Johnny Walker, Anthony Smith co-main. And really the rest of the card was pretty good to watch. And much like the previous week, sort of like by the time you get to the end, the booking does everything in its power to sort of like just destroy your interest. But, you know, there's some good stuff to talk about as well from that undercard. We've also got coming up next week, Mackenzie Dern versus Angela Hill is the main event, which I suppose has some interest. Still,
yeah, I think that's a decent main event. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it's relevant. Everybody likes Angela Hill. At this point, I think I've basically given up all hope that Mackenzie Dern is actually going to be good. But, even as bad as she currently is, she's frequently still quite effective and at least making people freak out and make mistakes. So that's coming up later in the show. I think first, though, we're just going to start by talking about the top of last week's Fight Night card. And I don't think there is really much to say about the main event, is there?
It was over blessedly quickly.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, I don't know. I've seen a lot of praise for Jailton Almeida, and I've got to say I'm a bit dubious. Just because, okay, like he's the opposite of, you know, he's not at least doing the Kron Gracie thing, or at least the Kron Gracie in his most recent fight thing.
Yeah,
Jailton Almeida at least knows like what brought him to the dance. But
he's got to take people down.
Yeah. But also, like, watching a muscled up, like, BJJ ace shoot desperately for takedowns and then get them immediately and win is exactly the kind of, like, general structure of a game where you would expect it to just absolutely disintegrate horrendously at some point.
Oh, yeah. The moment somebody can stop a takedown. I mean, the takedown he got on Rozenstruik was so comical. Like,
yeah, so,
literally the commentators laughed. Like, Daniel Cormier and Dominic Cruz could not stop themselves laughing. They were like, he just fell over.
Yeah. I mean, this was very much like the John Jones Cyril Gane thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is that you're like, okay, yeah, it's a first round submission. That's sort of objectively impressive, but also your opponent, who everyone knows is not a very good grappler, has managed to look like he's in fact just the worst grappler to ever. Like he's never tried doing the grappling thing before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does take a lot of the bloom off the rose.
And I think that's going to be a bit of a theme for our episode. I've decided today is, the state of like fight preparation in modern MMA, especially in these like shallower divisions. But like, what is the excuse for a guy like Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Cyril Gahn is a great one to bring up as well. The guy who apparently just like got out wrestled by Ngannou and then just wasn't training until his camp for John Jones. And even then, I don't think we even saw a full camp's worth of actual wrestling and grappling training. There's no way. One camp's worth, he would have had some idea of what to do in those positions.
6 weeks sprawl training.
But you know what I mean? Like, we would have seen it fail because it would have been like stiff and awkward. He literally did not know what to do. He had not practiced. And that's what I feel about Rozenstruik. Like, he has a grappling coach there at cage side. They were pointing out how his coach was like, he's on the ground getting crushed by Almeida. And this is a thing I hate that MMA fighters do. You would be warned off of doing this in boxing immediately. MMA fighters look at their corners when they're talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can get away with it more in grappling situations. You have a little more time. You're not in quite as much danger averting your eyes, but I still think it's a very bad habit to indulge. But he's literally looking at his corner. They are trying to walk him through, move by move, the very basics of like what to do in half guard. Like, somebody had to tell him, get an underhook. And he was, you know what I mean? Like, why don't certain fighters learn? What is the barrier preventing a guy from Rozenstruik from, he has been exactly this bad at wrestling and grappling the entire time he's been in the UFC.
He probably just doesn't like it.
I guess. Yeah. And most of the time it's not necessary. So fair enough. But like, Almeida, it wasn't even a good shot.
No, I mean, it was very funny though.
Yeah. But that is that kind of,
because it was like, I mean, he went down like he was one of the bad guys in Home Alone, and Macaulay Culkin had just tied his shoes together.
Yes.
Like, what he needed as he toppled over was a like sound effect, but instead he just went down with this profound look of like sadness, resignation, and just like, oh, what now?
The sort of regally sad face of like an Easter Island statue, just sort of literally a statue just sort of falling over backwards. I don't know. I don't have an answer in this particular case or an explanation beyond he probably just doesn't enjoy practicing it.
He's a very stiff man. I'm not
yes.
sure if his joints work that good.
His corner was like, hey, relax. I'm like, this man has never relaxed in a fight in his life. What are you talking about? Even on the feet, he is incredibly just wired and tense. Was the sort of, the fact that was the nature of that takedown attempt, which only succeeded because this is heavyweight, is that part of your concern for Almeida going forward?
I mean, it's just like the vanishingly short amount of time I've seen him on the feet. It's just him getting hit extremely cleanly by Shamil Abdurakhimov.
Yeah.
And, it just makes you think, how much are we seeing a Ronda Rousey situation here? Because, this is exactly the kind of archetype you would get at lower weight classes, but they wouldn't get anywhere near to a title fight. It's just that, obviously, women's bantamweight back in the day was insanely weak, and modern heavyweight is also insanely weak. I'm glad Jailton is, again, not doing either of the Kron Gracie things, which are, either having a stand-up battle for no reason or simply just plodding around not doing anything.
Yeah.
At least he's working on takedowns. He knows what he's good at. But, it does look like the kind of style that would just absolutely disintegrate at some point. But, I mean, the heavyweight and light heavyweight divisions are absolutely terrible right now. So, it's hard to say when exactly that would be. He should fight Cyril Gahn next.
I mean, absolutely.
He called out Taito Ivasa, but that's bullshit. I don't want to see that. It wouldn't be funny. What would be funny would be seeing him fight Cyril Gahn.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, they would both
Cyril Gahn has the potential to absolutely replicate his last fight again.
That is true. While also actually being effective when he's on the feet. I mean, that's a little more of a two-true outcome kind of fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Khan is very capable of pestering and making him uncomfortable without committing any grievous mistakes. He's going to have to push for those takedowns. And this is what happened here. I mean, he was clearly a little anxious about Rosenstruik, who started the fight just, in Rosenstruik fashion, just coming after him. And then the shot, I mean, the reason we're criticizing it, what happened is he throws a pretty obvious throwaway left hook. I didn't think it was a particularly convincing setup. And then just falls to his knees immediately for the shot. And it works because Rosenstruik has no awareness of how to react to a takedown, apparently. The fact that he just gets an arm around both of his legs at once before he can even sort of consider whether he might want to sprawl or not. That's what makes the takedown work, is that he just gathers the legs. And so he doesn't need any drive, but it is not a pretty takedown. The entry into it shouldn't work, basically.
No, I mean, the booth was comparing it to Tony Couture.
Yeah, literally, they said that. Yeah. Yeah, that reminded me of when fat James Toney got taken down. That is not a good sign when your opponent has, I'd guess, 10 UFC fights under his belt. Mm-hmm. James Toney had an excuse.
Many of them main events or high card staples.
Yeah, a shocking number. Let's see, how many main events has Rosenstruik gotten?
Don't do this, Connor. It's going to depress the shit out of me.
Volkov, Rosenstruik versus Sakai, Rosenstruik versus Gon, Overeem versus Rosenstruik. Jairzinho Rosenstruik, going back to 2019, has had 5 main event bookings. A man who does not know how to sprawl has had 5 main event bookings. Well, that's the heavyweight division for you, folks. Let's move on and talk about the other absolute bummer of this card. Although this one, I have to say, I did find it kind of comical in various ways. This one was a little more,
this was a good time.
This was engaging. For as terrible as it was. Johnny Walker versus Anthony Smith. Yeah, I know you watched this one, Phil, because you were tweeting about it.
Yep.
You were talking about how bad light heavyweight has become.
I mean, both of the big man divisions just dreadful.
It's true.
I can't remember a time when they were this bad. Maybe the DC championship reign when he fought Lewis for the title, but even then, I think.
Well, then we still had DC, kicking around, and DC was a good fighter.
Mm-hmm. So this was one of those ones where I saw some people online and in post-fight podcasts and so on. They were like, this was the most measured and strategic performance of Johnny Walker's career.
Mm.
And you know what I have to say to that?
Mm-hmm.
That is correct.
I kind of agree. As far as modern day Johnny Walker performances go, he didn't actually look that bad. This is graded on.
But it begs the question, right? Yeah. What is Johnny Walker's second most measured and strategic performance?
Yeah. I don't know. Is it fighting Thiago Santos? I don't think that counts as a measured performance.
No.
He didn't.
He
didn't know what he was doing. He just sort of flopped around. I mean.
Yeah, it's probably his Contender Series fight with Enrique da Silva.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, so when Johnny Walker was coming out for this fight, I was watching and I was thinking, you can really understand why people are excited about this guy. Because, he's huge, he's visibly thrilled to be there, he's got, he's just bursting with energy.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he's just this, massive, super talented athlete. And, Anthony Smith comes out looking dejected and somewhat small compared to him.
Yep.
And I was just like, you can see how people could be excited for Johnny Walker.
Yeah.
Like, this guy should be awesome. And then he comes out with a plan, which is like calf kicks.
That was the plan.
That is the end. That's the beginning and the end of it. And Anthony Smith's plan was like,
eat them.
Be tall be taller than this man. And then he looked up at Johnny Walker and he was like, I'm not.
I've made I've made a terrible mistake. I've miscalculated. I'm actually shorter. If only there was some readily available information that could have told me this. Yeah. This was the fight that made me think of the idea of like, what are these people doing to prepare? What are their teams are failing them utterly. What did Anthony Smith's people do to prepare him for this, given that he stepped in there as if he had never sparred somebody taller than him? He fought John Jones, and that is how dejected he looked here. Worse, actually. Worse, because at least...
because Johnny Walker is even bigger than John Jones.
Yeah, and at least his like...
even more ununderstandable.
At least his the low hum of panic he was feeling against John Jones, like, it actually got him to land like a lot of jabs and stuff. He looked baffled simply by the fact that the man was bigger than him. Which for somebody who's not good at fighting or somebody who's inexperienced is 100% understandable. Like, if you have ever sparred somebody taller than you, it's a miserable experience. You're like, oh, I feel in danger at all times, rather than the usual when you have size parity feeling of like, I know when I'm in range, I know when I'm out of range. You feel like you're in danger at all times, and any attempt to get to your range only intensifies that. Like, you don't know where you can hit them, you know they can hit you. It sucks. But this is why you develop ideas to get around this. Like, very basic things that Anthony Smith might have done differently here. Like, for example, a double jab would have been nice. You know what really struck me about this fight, Phil?
Enlighten me.
It was backwards. The rule for MMA fights is that the guy who comes forward wins. And this was backwards. When each guy tried to come forward, they started losing. It didn't make any sense. Like, Anthony Smith tried to storm forward. He had no idea how to actually work his way into range. So every now and then he would just resort to just flinging himself forward, just shifting wildly and swinging. And it made Walker look like a good counterpuncher, which he's not. But because Anthony Smith was starting so obviously and from so far away and instantly destroying his position, Walker was able to just walk backwards and sling hooks at him, and they landed. But when Johnny Walker tried to come forward, he also doesn't know how to close the distance. That's why he just landed low kicks. When he tried to step in with a punch, his range was completely off, and that's when Smith landed his best shots of the fight. They were all counters, Anthony Smith's best punches. Couple of big counter right hands, because Walker just like no jab, no setup, just sort of flings himself forward with a right hand, falls out of his stance, and if you're ready to hit him, you're going to hit. You're going to connect. I can't recall another fight in MMA where the guy who tries to come forward just suddenly starts losing.
I'm sure there is one between like
of course,
two counterpunches, but this was I mean, and this is the main thing. Anthony Smith isn't a counterpuncher,
no,
and neither is Johnny Walker, which made it so unutterably dreadful.
Yeah,
I mean, this was just so bad.
Walker won because he happened to have a relatively safe tool at range, which Anthony Smith, again, a crime of his team's preparation, utter malpractice. He did not. I don't know that they even told him to start checking the low kicks, but clearly, like so many MMA fighters, he was not prepared to do it, nor was he prepared to do any of the usual like workarounds to, I'm not comfortable checking, it hurts my shins or whatever, fair enough. But then you gotta punish them. You gotta have an idea of how you're gonna try to take that weapon away, if not with pure defense. And he didn't have that. I mean, Walker, he wasn't setting up these low kicks. He was just flipping them out there, and they just kept landing. Smith, I got to look at the stats. How many low kicks do they say that he ate?
I will say, whilst you're looking this up, in the very small, like positive things to take away from this. At least Johnny Walker has learned, as all insane freaks should learn. He doesn't have to put very much on things.
Yeah, hey.
That was the one like major positive you could take from this, because he could just flick out low calf kicks, and they were clearly badly hurting Anthony Smith almost immediately.
Yeah.
Because Johnny Walker is a giant freak, which again is a positive to take away, but it's also just incredibly dispiriting.
Yes.
Because you just look at it and you're like, that's it. That is what... And, you know, the booth were talking about what an incredible work ethic he has now, like, how much he loves the sport and how much he loves learning. And, like, that's what it's getting him?
Yeah. What he has learned, this is very much in line with what we've seen, is to do less. And that's, hey, there are positive aspects to that transformation. As you said, doing less puts him less at risk. He doesn't just get, it's not 50-50, I might get knocked out right away. And he compromises himself less when he does throw. And it has effect, because he's massive, and, you know, light heavyweights have power. But that's it. That's the sum, apparently, of what he's learned, is to do less. It's hard to point to any, like, real technical improvement. The game plan is kind of one size fits all. Just be big and don't hang out right in front of the guy. That's it. Before I tell you how many of them were landed, of the low kicks, I'm going to tell you that Johnny Walker landed 92 significant strikes total.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those would you guess were low kicks?
68.
Pretty close. 56. 56 of 92 connections were low kicks.
I mean, that's true. He did start, like, kind of kicking the shit out, like, actually beating Anthony Smith up towards the end of the fight a tiny bit.
Anthony Smith, of the 56 that he threw, rather, Anthony Smith ate 51.
Ugh.
That was the level of defense that we saw on display here. So yes, an incredibly dispiriting fight for the whole division. That, like, Johnny Walker's probably going to get a title shot.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Jamal Hill was like, yes, I would love to fight you. And you're like, sure, yes, why wouldn't you?
He already knocked him out in a round. Of course he would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like, you know, what else is he going to do? Fight potentially good people?
Well, there aren't any.
I mean, he could fight... I mean, if you give me a choice between Ankalaev or Johnny Walker, I'm going to be like, look at how explosive he is.
I mean, I don't know. Ankalaev's got his own issues. Ankalaev's issues make more sense to me. They're so glaringly psychological.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, I would still much rather fight Johnny Walker than Ankalaev. Ankalaev is very good.
If I'm choosing, for sure. Yeah, Ankalaev might.
If I was Jamal Hill, I'm just going to be like, do I want to fight Ankalaev, Johnny Walker, or Igyan?
Because Ankalaev,
which one of those I would pick.
If I'm Jamal Hill, Ankalaev's a guy I know that I might beat his ass for an extended period of time and force him to figure something out. Mm-hmm. Johnny Walker, he's going to have one idea. He's just going to do it the whole time. 100%. He's going to have one idea, and he's going to get less dangerous as the fight goes on, as happens every time.
And yeah, Smith had his moment of, like, trying to hype himself up against Walker.
Yeah.
It's like, you're taking things away from my family. What was he saying?
He said, you're attacking my family. And Johnny Walker said, huh? And he said, you're attacking my family. And Johnny Walker said, what?
Very good.
What was going on there? I guess that was Smith trying to hype himself up, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, it was exactly like his, incredible comeback win over Hector Lombard, with the one notable factor being that Hector Lombard is 4 feet tall, and Johnny Walker is 7 feet tall. Meaning that in one case, like, Smith hyped himself up and then just bowled Hector Lombard over. And in the other one, he hypes himself up and then just sort of looked angrily at Johnny Walker whilst continuing to do the exact same thing of standing on the outside and getting kicked.
Yeah. You're attacking my family. And then he just eats a low kick. Yeah. So there you go, folks. That's the heavyweight and light heavyweight divisions in, both pressed into one neat little nutshell. Let's take a break. When we come back, what do you say? Do we want to look ahead to Dern versus Hill, next week's main event, and then we will revisit the actually interesting undercard of this Rosenstrike Almeida event? Because there were some real highlights on the undercard for sure.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, we're taking a break then. When we come back, Mackenzie Dern, Angela Hill, and then the good parts of UFC on ABC, Rosenstrike versus Almeida.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands, continuing our theme of fighters who simply do not get better. And also going against that theme, we have next week's Fight Night main event, Mackenzie Dern, Category A, versus Angela Hill, Category B. Angela Hill, I think, undeniably, has gotten much better. She still has particular hang-ups, of a kind that basically all fighters grapple with their entire careers. She has a certain tendency to fight to the level of her competition, a certain tendency to sort of concede strategically and allow her opponents to kind of have at least flashes of the fight they want to have. And yet I think technically, in terms of endurance, also mental stamina, the two I think are inextricably linked, mental and physical stamina. She has undeniably improved over the course of her career, well into her, I guess, late 30s at this point. What is she, 36, 37?
She's 38.
38. I mean, my God.
Yeah. I mean, she was one of those people who came to the UFC and was like, oh, she's a great prospect. She's going to have lots of time to improve. And you're like, oh, she's pretty old.
She was like 32 already, yeah.
Yeah. But, one of those people who also just hasn't appeared to age at all and seems, in fact, at 38 to be like more physically cohesive than she was when she joined the UFC.
I think she's at her best right now. She's having a late prime. And she is taking on Mackenzie Dern, who has not gotten better at all. I mean, we've learned things about Mackenzie Dern, much in the way that we learned things about Paige Van Zandt. Right? Like when we found out that actually Paige Van Zandt is insanely tough, and people can like beat the shit out of her and she will be in there, still keep trying all the bad ideas she was trying from the beginning. I took that as a good sign. I took it as a good sign when Mackenzie Dern took on, I'm trying to remember which fight it was, early UFC fight. When she, took on, oh God, what was it? Amanda Hebush.
I don't know.
Amanda Hebush. That she took her
right,
on and she lost, but it was like, oh, she's tough. She's taking shots. She's not going away. She's not looking dejected. She's still going for it. I took that as a good sign. She has not progressed beyond that. She either gets somebody down with a truly horrible wrestling game, Kron Gracie vibes, or she fails to get them down, and she is an absolute mess with her striking. She is a horrible striker. There is no other way to say it. She's very, very bad at striking. And she has been that fighter the entire time, basically, that she's been in the UFC. I can't really point to any significant improvement or change of any kind
that loss to Yan Xiaonan was a majority decision.
Yeah.
I guess it's due to the...
I think she 10-8'd her in the first round, perhaps, or it was a round where she just completely crushed her on the ground. Yeah, the entire round.
Yep.
And then another round where she only crushed her on the ground for like half the round. So that was a 10-9. So yeah, we know who Mackenzie Dern is. We learned that she has the bare essentials of somebody who might be an MMA fighter, and then we have not gotten a chance to learn anything else since then.
Yeah. So the problem with this fight is that obviously Angela Hill has not historically been super invulnerable to getting instantly tapped in her fights.
That's true.
She is not someone who even, like, I don't think is particularly capable of fighting an approach which insulates her from her opponent's weapons. She is, whilst she will fight on the outside, she's not Yan Xiaonan. She's not naturally inclined to have an outside striking fight.
Yeah.
She will engage people in the clinch rather than pushing away from them. And yeah, I mean, most of how she beats people is just kind of generally out MMAing them.
Yeah.
She'll throw more than them on the feet. She'll beat them up when they clinch with her. Often, the key to a lot of her recent wins has been that she out-wrestles them and outworks them from top position.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
None of this sounds good against Mackenzie Dern, less so for over a 3-rounder. Because like you said, that Yan Xiaonan fight, admittedly, Dern looking terrible on the feet.
Yeah, absolutely dreadful.
She did clinch up with Yan. She did take her down, and she did come perilously close to submitting her. So yeah, I mean, this is the thing, is that, of all the improvements in Angela Hill, they do seem to be improvements of, just being better at MMA. And admittedly, sometimes that is just enough.
Sure. And a lot of them are sort of the intangible improvements of just experience, I think. Like being more comfortable. Yeah. Broadly more skilled and is just more comfortable, which allows her to, because one of her greatest shortcomings used to be her inability to sustain the level of scrappy fight, which she could not help but have with everyone. Now she has scrappy fights, and she keeps having them for 15 minutes or 25 minutes, given the rare occasion. And,
but yeah, I mean, admittedly, Marina Rodriguez is no one's idea of a defensive wrestling wunderkind.
No.
As we recently saw when she fought Anna Jandiroba. Mm-hmm. She just got absolutely crushed. And, she rather easily beat Mackenzie Dern.
This is the real problem, is that Mackenzie Dern, not only is her striking heinously bad, her wrestling is dog shit too.
Mm-hmm.
To the point that half the time it looks like she's not even trying to get the fight to the ground. But it's she'll get completely stuffed, and then she just can feel like, oh, I'm not at all in range to go for takedowns. I guess I have to swing punches at them, and she just resorts to that. So it's
I mean, I think her saving grace in the takedown is that she understands takedowns in kind of the same way that Charles Oliveira and to a lesser extent Fabricio Verdum understood takedowns, in that she will try insanely hard to hit takedowns with no fear of them getting countered in any way.
Yeah.
There's a sequence towards the end of round 1 of the Yan fight where she tries the hardest you have ever seen anyone try, including that dude who tried, I think, to do it on, was it Ed Herman, who had an arm throw. She is just hopping along the side of the cage, kind of carrying Yan on her back. She is trying so hard to flip Yan over.
Yeah.
And in the end, throws herself face first into the mat. And Yan kind of jumps on her and starts beating her up.
Yep.
But she manages to reverse the position because she's still like a sensationally good grappler, and Yan is understandably scared of her. But like, this is, I think, the best thing about her offensive wrestling is that she doesn't give a shit if of the ways that it can go wrong. Admittedly, you know, as I've said many times, that tendency came back to punish Charles Oliveira. I will be shocked if it comes back to punish her in a fight with Angela Hill. This isn't someone with like a sneaky guillotine or a
no, yeah, not that.
A funky back funky back take game that you could suddenly cause her to get punished for doing that.
But it could perhaps mean that she just can't get the takedowns. I mean, I would say Hill's takedown defense is better than Yan Xiaonan's. Yan Xiaonan has better footwork evasively, but Xiaonan got crushed by Carla Esparza.
Yep.
Who was a good wrestler, but very small and awful footwork, terrible on the advance. And, Jan's problem against Mackenzie Dern was that she would like get into a half grappling position. I mean, like the grappling sequences in the second round of that fight are Mackenzie Dern essentially pulling guard. And, you know, she does a more admirable job of working with that than Kron Gracie. She's got a little more Damian Maya in her, where it's like a lot of attempts to sort of awkwardly entangle a leg with her own and then quickly sitting up into a single, and there's more like Ronnie Yaya, Damian Maya to Mackenzie Dern's jiu-jitsu player's wrestling game. That she creates weird entanglements that almost pass for takedowns when she can actually keep contact with somebody. Angela Hill is actually better at just like stuffing takedowns and getting her feet the hell out of danger than Yan Xiaonan is. So I don't know. It feels like kind of a wash for me, that point of comparison. Like, I think Angela Hill's a better wrestler, but I think she's worse at staying away. So,
yeah.
And in
that's
fact,
the thing is, I just find myself concerned at how little she insulates herself
right
from the opponent. And whoever they are and whatever kind of fight they want to have generally.
Yeah.
No, you know what? I'm going to pick Angela Hill.
Yeah.
I just think, you know, there's always a chance that that Dern will just force her into some kind of ugly scramble, and that, as I said, you know, Angela Hill has been instantly tapped 3 times that I can think of in her MMA career. She did, was it twice against Rose Namajunas, also against Randa Marcos. Where
yeah, I think you're right. It's certainly Rose.
None of whom were either like Rose is a much better offensive wrestler now, but she wasn't then.
Yeah.
And you know, Randa Marcos never particularly good, and she just like bum rushed Hill, and Hill kind of didn't disengage and then got tapped.
Yeah.
I can 100% see that happening, but also I just think, you know, if that doesn't happen, Hill's just going to make her miserable on the feet.
Yeah.
She's going to be constantly beating her up in the clinch if Dern isn't getting takedowns off of it.
Yeah, and that clinch could go both ways.
That's the other side of the Yan Xiaonan thing, is that Angela Hill, especially in her late career version, will be probably proactively kicking the shit out of Dern. Much more so than like Yan, who just mostly kind of waited for Dern to do things and then punished her for it.
Exactly. And you mentioned that Angela doesn't have like a guillotine, but the clinch, it could go both ways. Is it dangerous maybe to engage somebody whose only chance of beating you is with grappling in the clinch? Sure. It is also a way to actually punish them for trying to grapple you. If you can shut them out and prevent the takedowns, then every time they tie up with you, they're going to associate that with a miserable experience. Oh my God. I'm getting a new updated version, by the way. If anybody listens to the MMA Depressed Us, Zane Simon and I were getting very fixated on this Papa John's Doritos Cool Ranch calzone commercial. They now have an updated version, which they've sort of half covered the image of the Doritos crusted calzone with just DJ Khaled just completely taking up the screen and yelling at the camera.
Wow.
So that's good. They
It
were
just sounds more and more delicious.
like, people don't like the way this thing looks. Let's stick a famous annoying person in front of it.
Also, I just watched a takedown attempt in, I think, round 3 of Dern Yan, where Dern just sort of put her head down,
Yeah.
and then blindly charged forward into the fence.
Yeah. Just headbutts
Like
the fence.
Yes, very good.
Yeah. It is complete messy desperation. And the point of all this is, Yan Xiaonan survived the grappling exchanges with Mackenzie Dern.
Mm-hmm.
All she really did when the situation got so bad that she couldn't afford to keep like trying to escape or else she would give up a really bad position, she just stayed solid. She got trapped in an arm triangle at one point. She was like, okay, I'm just going to defend this. I'm not going to fully give up the pass, and I'm going to focus entirely on defense. And that is something I think Angela Hill has learned. You know, there's that shocking loss to Rhonda Marcos thrown in there. But, you know, like a lot of people have tested her grappling. She's done a lot of grappling.
Yeah, I mean, that was many years and many fights ago now. She's a very active fighter.
Yeah. And yes, she got out wrestled at points by Verna Jandiroba. She also got threatened with a ton of submissions that she just didn't give up. She was very solid. She recognized she was in danger. She weathered the bad spots. And I think the thing is against Dern, like that might be enough. If you have 5 rounds in which to fight her, you can afford to lose 2 rounds. You can afford to be like, oh shit, this isn't going my way. I'll try again next round, and just try to stay tight. And you don't have to have like Tisha Torres, insane arms to just like bust your way out of holds. You just play defense. And it is, anybody with any combat experience knows, it's actually incredibly difficult to get to somebody who is only trying to defend. In almost any kind of combative sport or game, somebody is just trying to stay away, just trying not to lose. And the beauty of MMA is that you can do that and still win, because you only have to play that way in like one phase. I'm not going to lose in this phase. Everywhere else, I'm going to try to win. That can be a winning strategy. So I am also going to take Angela Hill. I just think Mackenzie Dern sucks. Like, she's not a good MMA fighter. And
No.
yeah, there's a strong chance she gets a good position, and she's a worse wrestler than Verna Jandiroba, but is a more dynamic, more aggressive submission grappler. Jandiroba's a little more positional. She might just shock the hell out of Angela and submit her. She's almost certainly going to get some extended moments of grappling time. Just incidentally, weird scrambles are going to happen. Even if she doesn't hit a takedown, she's going to pull guard. She's going to entangle a leg. These situations will arise. Weird stuff happens in MMA fights. But if Angela can just survive those moments, I think she's just a sturdy enough fighter to otherwise just pick up rounds, just poking Mackenzie with her jab, beating her, stopping her wrestling in the clinch and punishing her. Yeah, I'm taking Hill.
Yeah, I'm very concerned just because.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, like, the other thing that that differentiates Hill's early submission losses to, from her later career fights where she didn't get submitted is that she didn't fight anyone who was a dynamic submission threat.
And that is true. That's true.
So, yeah, it would be one of those ones where if it happened just like almost immediately again, you could just be like, oh yeah, she was always like that, wasn't she?
Wouldn't be a big
But yeah, I mean, I'm also picking Angela Hill because I think I would just find it philosophically offensive if she didn't win this. Partially because, she deserves a signature win. She's been in the trenches all this time. She's gotten, like, either lost dubious decisions or gotten straight up robbed.
Yep.
Like, more than almost anyone I can remember.
Yeah, multiple times. The most notable in
yeah,
my mind being the split decision loss to Claudia Gadelha, which should have been a signature win for her, for sure.
Yeah, and she just doesn't have one, really.
Yeah.
You know, you look at her record, and it's just like wins over people who aren't that good, and then, you know, split decision losses to people who are. In which many cases, I think probably the majority, she probably deserved to win them.
Yeah, the Lemos one would have been another signature, which was close enough that I was fine with Lemos winning it, but Angela Hill could have won it. She didn't.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I just feel like it would be mean and unfair if she didn't win this one. So I'm picking her in a fairly uncharacteristic, optimistic pick.
Yep. We're rooting
guaranteeing that she is now going to lose instantly.
Yeah, of course. But we can't help but root for people who get better. I mean, that is, I won't speak for you, Phil, but for me, the most gratifying thing by far of following MMA is, like tracking the improvement of fighters. And when fighters learn from their mistakes, there's nothing more fun to watch for me than, long term than to see somebody improve. And should we mention it all, by the way, while we're here? Edmund Shabazian is fighting in the co-main on the topic of why won't fighters learn, and occasionally they do. This is obviously he appeared to have learned in his last fight. He fought a very measured, certainly still aggressive, but a very measured fight against Dalcia Lungiambula. Not an amazing win, but the guy needed a comeback fight. And he did not shoot himself in the foot, which appeared to be a big part of what was happening in the 3 straight losses he suffered up to that point. Now he's taking on what I see as a serious test, possibly too serious too soon, of the prevailing issue with him, which is that he would panic and be too tense and overthrow and overstrain himself in every position and gas. And then the moment he felt himself gassing, would lose heart, and that would just create a downward spiral. And Anthony Hernandez is nothing if not resilient. He keeps coming. He does not appear to get tired. He just goes. So what do you make of that?
Yeah.
Any idea? Do you have any feelings on whether or not Shabazian, if these are actually like durable improvements he's made?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good test for that reason, I think. It's just the sort of long and short of it. But yeah, I mean, I think if it comes down to it, he's probably just like dynamic enough.
Yeah.
Or at least like I think if he can have like 2 good rounds in him, to at least get out like a winning position on Anthony Hernandez, even if he's like even if he does like start to slow down or collapse afterwards.
Yeah, Fluffy's not much of a finisher. He has to completely. I mean, then again, he can finish people after he has utterly broken them, and that has absolutely happened before to Shabazian. But I really liked the look of the performance he put on against Lungiambula. He had a very limited but equally, if not even more, dynamic opponent. Very powerful, very fast, and he maintained his range. He did a lot of feinting. He worked the body a lot. And then he sort of, in an Ian Gary-ish way, kind of built on his lead. But it was very, very measured. It was the kind of performance that people who don't know what they're looking at thought they were watching in Johnny Walker versus Anthony Smith. Like, wow, this guy has really improved. Look how self-contained he is. It looked that way to me from Shabazian. So I would like to think.
Yeah, and also he got away from Edmund Taverdian.
That is probably part of it. That is clearly a guy who his fighters will actively hinder his fighters' improvement for various codependent reasons.
So I think is Shabazian at Extreme Couture now?
Can't be.
I remember he is at a gym where he went there, and I was like, oh, good.
Can't be worse.
No, I mean, it's unless he was like, I've decided to leave Edmund Taverdian, and will be training in SBG Isle.
Let's see. Any clues on his Instagram? Yeah, here's his most recent photo is him sparring with Sean Strickland at Extreme Couture. So there you go.
So yeah, I mean he's shown all that you could want from like, given those 3 losses in a pretty short 2-rounder. You know, he's 25 years old.
Yeah.
He's gone to a better camp. He looks better. I would like to see him do well.
Yeah, he basically had a protracted prospect loss phase, where he had to have his youthful arrogance basically beaten out of him. And again, it's very gratifying to see that he appears to have matured in that sense. And I am going to cast my vote for he continues on that track, and combined with his athletic abilities, is capable of simply shutting the technically inferior Anthony Hernandez out of the fight with his striking. Possibly testing his famous ability to push an insane pace by doing what he did to Lungiambula and just thrashing his body as often as possible.
I mean, that worked. Wasn't that how, like, didn't Holland mess Hernandez up to the body as well?
No, he just crushed him in the clinch in like 30 seconds.
Oh, okay, never mind.
39-second knockout, knees and punches.
Nice.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, yeah, that would be disappointing, I suppose, if he just goes in there and instantly dusts Hernandez. What I want to see out of Shahbazyan at this point are signs of continued growth. That would be what I'd like to see. Anyway, let's take one more break. When we come back, we are going to talk about another fighter on the brighter side of this spectrum, Ian Machado, the future. Maybe we're going to add another one in there soon. The Ian Machado, the future, not Conor McGregor, Gary, had a fight against Daniel Rodriguez, which was disappointing only in that it was incredibly impressive and easy for him. We're going to talk about that. Carlos Ulberg, the man, what's the old meme about, about the guy she tells you not to worry about? Carlos Ulberg, who is the guy they tell Israel Adesanya not to worry about, continues to look okay. Alex Morono beat Tim Means, yada yada. Matt Brown got a knockout at 57 years old. We're going to talk about these things after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Okay, we're back to talk about Ian Garry, who I believe this week expressed confusion that people mistake him for a Conor McGregor clone. Or copying Conor McGregor. He expressed that he found
who could have put this idea in their heads? Who was it? Can we find them?
He literally quotes Conor McGregor. He does the Conor McGregor strut. That's a very perplexing confusion to have.
Right. He's like, as a great man once said, we're not here to take part, we're here to take over. I'm not a Conor McGregor clone, by the way.
Yeah, I attributed, sort of. But anyway, this is basically the reason that people don't like Ian Garry, don't take him seriously, because they pay too much attention to what he says. You know, this is my Angela Hill style career improvement. I've just stopped paying attention to what the fighters say. I just watch their fights. And I only pay attention to what they say when I get some clue in the fights that they're going to be charming to me. That being said, he dropped the Conor McGregor shtick after this. I did watch this post-fight interview, and he was just he had a little bit of, what did the youth say, Phil? A little riz of his own.
I don't know what they say.
They say riz. Yeah.
Why would you ask me that?
Well, I don't know. You're very old. I forgot.
Yeah, but Jesus.
Anyway, yeah, he had a little flair of his own. He was feeling himself, and the performance, it is basically impossible to find fault with it. As I said, I was only mildly disappointed because I know Daniel Rodriguez to be a fighter who learns, who gathers data over the course of a fight, and will continue finding openings and adapting down the stretch, and he just didn't get the chance. I mean, Ian Gary had his number immediately. He literally picked up on the opening for the head kick he finished the fight with in, I'm going to say, 30 seconds. First body.
Famously, he spoke to multiple people weeks in advance of this fight, and he was like, I'm going to knock Daniel Rodriguez out with a right head kick.
Well, I did not know that, actually. That's very funny.
Yeah, he literally said to, I forget who it was. Was it to, it might have been to Sean Sheehan or one of the Severe MMA guys, but he was on an interview with someone. He was like, I'm telling you how I'm going to knock him out. And the guy was like, all right, tell me. He was like, right head kick. If I knock him out with anything else apart from a right head kick, I didn't mean it and it was an accident. I mean, and that again, like, you don't need to do the Conor McGregor thing if you can do that.
I mean, he's got his own personality and his own bravado, which is way more interesting than the McGregor shtick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so he probably saw it on tape study and knew even before the fight. But I can tell you, just watching the fight, he throws a body kick in the first 30 seconds, which Rodriguez blocks with both hands, dropping his guard. And I was like, oh, Ian Gary is too observant for that. He is going to fire a head kick. And that's what he did.
It was almost certainly that he was like, I'm going to do this so that I can hit him with the high kick later on.
Yeah, quite possibly. Either
because he spends the first few minutes basically just landing right body kicks.
Yep, he set it up very diligently. Yeah, either he had that in his head, and so he created a game plan which would allow him to land the head kick, or he said he was going to do the head kick because he already saw the opening.
He also told, I believe it was, I saw Eric Nixick saying he said exactly the same thing to him as well. He was like, I'm going to knock him out with a right head kick.
Hey. Respect. Yeah, I mean, just a really solid fight, honestly. He set up the body kick really well. His footwork looked solid. Once again, I expressed some concerns about this. Just as against the much shorter Gabe Green, he was perfectly willing to keep his jab working against a southpaw.
Mm-hmm.
He still nearly got himself into trouble when he, too early, in my opinion, tried to rush in with a combo, and he almost got decapitated with a counter hook from Rodriguez. But this is just a thing I think that's going to happen in Ian Gary fights. He is going to take some risks early to see what happens, and occasionally, as against Song Kenan, he is going to be punished for them. But at least what we learned from that fight is that is not a death knell. He can be punished for them, he can even be hurt, and he will get right back to fighting very solidly after that.
Yeah, I mean, this was the highlight of the card.
Yep.
In terms of things that people will remember. And it's also just like, this is one of the things which is the difference. Is that, you have someone who watched enough tape on his opponent.
Yeah.
That he was like, I know that I can get him with this specific strike.
Yeah.
Because his reactions are so, I'm absolutely sure I can draw fight-ending reactions out of him and capitalize on them.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we have Jairzinho Rozenstruik like, Jailton Almeida wants to take me down?
Yeah.
And Anthony Smith being like, man, look at how big Johnny Walker is.
He's tall? Yeah. I should have brought in maybe one sparring partner who's taller than me or anything. Yeah, that is 100% the difference. That even if it's the other way around, even if his preparation was, entirely focused on just his own technical development, whatever,
mm-hmm.
and he wanted to land the head kick, one way or the other, he came into the fight with a plan.
Yep.
And even if it is a super single note plan, even if you are definitely at risk of getting too fixated on doing the thing you want to do and letting opportunities to do things that will work pass you by, coming in with a plan is much, much, much better than not having a plan at all. A bad plan is better than no plan, without question.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think the plan was bad. I mean, I suspect that he did see it on tape, and that's why he went for it, because as I said, the initial reaction to the first body kick, I immediately thought, oh, head kick. Later, there's going to be a head kick.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Ian Gary, whatever people think of him, like, you focus your hate on like Paddy Pimblett. Like, Ian Gary's good, at least, you know, he's good and he's getting better. Like that makes up for a lot in my book.
You know who I would like to see him fight? You know, he called out Neil Magny, which is a
great call out.
Like, great call out. You know, that's a great test.
Very winnable fight. Also, somehow it's like a fight where I'm like, oh, he's going to win. But I also have admiration for it because nobody ever calls out Neil Magny.
Yeah.
He's sort of having his cake and eating it too for this particular MMA nerd.
Also, it would be very funny if he was like, he obsessively studied all this Neil Magny tape, and he just gets in there, and you just see his eyes go on focus, and he just starts going, clinch. But no, I mean, I would like to see Ian Gary fight Jack Della Maddalena.
Sure.
I don't care about this kind of stuff anymore. Like, I don't care about like ruining prospects. I've realized that like every time this kind of stuff happens, it's always been something it's generally always been something that I've been like really happy happened. You know, when the two fighters were in their prime, you know, Phil Davis, Alexander Gustafsson.
Oh yeah.
Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman, like, Islam, Makhachev against Arman Tsarukyan, like, any of this kind of stuff, like, I don't fucking care. Match the cool prospects up whilst they're still, you know, loaded with maximal confidence.
Well, yeah, and all those examples you just listed, none of those fighters were derailed by those fights.
Yeah, exactly.
What you're talking about is two people who have basically fully fleshed themselves out. They are ready to break through. And the guy who doesn't win will probably just break through later. Like, at that point, yeah, you should just be fighting good fighters. I'm 100% in favor of, like, blue chip versus blue chip, fringe contender versus fringe contender. That type of matchmaking, absolutely. There is a limit.
Because, I mean, you know, as much as I would like, you know, it would be like a decent task to see Ian Gary, you know, try and solve the largely, you know, mental puzzle that is beating Neil Magny. You know, It's just like, I've seen enough people do it that it wouldn't exactly thrill me. I'd just be like, oh yes, well done. You know, it would be a bit of a box ticking exercise.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes or no. But like, Ian Gary against Jack Della Maddalena, that is a fucking thrilling fight.
Yep.
That would be, you know, absolutely perfect as like the middle of the card, or like the opening card fight on just like a big pay-per-view.
That's a pay-per-view main card opener. It would also be a perfectly acceptable fight night main event.
Yes, 100%.
Be a great fight night main event. And, yeah, I'm fully in favor of that. I agree. I think from the Gary's looking out for his career, he's looking to make moves perspective, Neil Magny is a brilliant call out. Because it both earns the respect of hardcore losers like me, because I'm like, nobody calls out Neil Magny. But at the same time, smark that I am, I can acknowledge that it's like, oh, you know what? That is actually an insanely winnable fight. Especially for a guy who clearly prepares intelligently for his opponents. He is going to dust Neil Magny like dynamic strikers do. Yeah, I think your suggestion is fantastic. I don't think that's really a great risk of derailing either guy any more than like.
No, I mean, like you said, it just doesn't generally happen if they're really quality fighters.
Yeah, and they both look like they
then
are.
They both just make their way onwards.
Yeah, either one of these guys can stand a loss right now. If anything, it'll likely be an experience that either of them could learn from. Yeah. All right, so what else happened on this goddamn card? We forgot to mention, by the way, the other highlight of the card was a really shockingly fantastic fight between Douglas Silva de Andrade and Cody Stamann on the prelims. Would like to talk about that. A bit frustrating as well, but also very fun. But what else stood out to you here?
Matt Brown getting an awesome KO.
Yeah.
That was one of those ones where I found myself thinking, like, Court McGee is favored in this fight.
Yep.
But also I found myself, the more I was looking at it, the more I found myself thinking, like, there's a reason why, like Carlos Condit, who fought Court McGee before him, Court McGee never reached the heights of the old men he is fighting.
True.
Like, these people have dropped down from a greater height than Court McGee unfortunately could ever reach.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And yeah, I think there might just be a level of firepower here which he just can't hang with.
I did think, though, I mean, that is also sort of the story with Brian Barberena.
Brian Barberena at least hit super hard.
Yeah, he at least has some pop, yeah. But Barberena appeared to have, in fact, hit his own wall, but was still just, like, younger enough to wear Matt Brown out. That was my concern. I did pick Court McGee, foolishly. But my picks have been dog shit lately. I gotta tell you, these miserable cards are especially difficult to pick. Yeah, I mean, Court McGee did start. He was just going to try to swamp Matt Brown with wrestling. And my feeling was he's probably just going to tire him out. And
yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, is that, like, Matt Brown is like he's like Jim Miller nowadays.
Yeah, he just gets tired really fast. Yeah.
Yeah, if you get him out of the first, it's a much more challenging proposition.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had a good plan of, like, countering the jab with low kicks, and then he countered the jab with a huge punch, and instantly knocked Court McGee out.
And a dope knockout, too. One shot,
Yeah.
didn't even move to follow up. Court McGee wasn't even fully unconscious, but he, like, fell down. He, like, lifted his head and saw that Matt Brown wasn't finishing him and almost just let his head fall back in relief. It's over. And the referee agreed. Yeah, badass walk-off KO. Matt Brown apparently tied the record for all-time KOs in the UFC. I think...
Considering that that's with Derek Lewis.
Yeah, right? Who only wins by KO, who cannot win in any other way, and who has had about 38 UFC fights in a shorter span of time.
And who fights people who are, let's be honest, dreadful.
Bad, yeah. Yeah, who are bad. Even the good ones are in marked ways pretty bad. And I guess he wants to try to top that record. He might get his chance. I'm not sure Derek Lewis is going to keep knocking people out for much longer. So yeah, Matt Brown, man.
Yeah. Awesome shit.
What else? I mean, we did have the, Douglas De Silva fight with Cody Stamann. Another one that I picked incorrectly, largely on the basis of Cody Stamann's last fight, of which I think we saw some flashes here, but he had to, this is a very Cody Stamann thing, that he had to work himself up to it. I think he's a bit of a Drew Dober in that he's, like, bouncy. He like, his primary mode of defense is to move his feet and get out of range, which I think is a big reason why, he can't press people, but also that we've not seen him, like, planting his feet and throwing with power throughout his career. But you look at the man, he is just one of these, like, tank-shaped human beings who, has, like, whole body durability. Like, he ate 7,000 body shots in this fight, and he was pressing in round 3 and almost knocking Douglas De Silva out. Clearly, like Drew Dober, his apparent lack of power throughout his career has been really a result of stylistic factors. Not that when given the chance he can't hit hard. And in his last fight against Luan Lacerda, I thought we saw Cody Stamann, after a, like, 3-fight losing streak, sort of reaching a point in his career where he said, fuck it, I'm going to walk people down and hit them. And it was a mixed bag against Lacerda. There were long stretches where he, was moving around too much on the outside, was getting chewed up with kicks. He had to be persuaded to come forward. But when he did, putting together great combinations, tearing up the body, landing that beautiful left hook that he has in the pocket, working in with double jabs, lots of really nice, like low center of gravity boxing, and a lot more aggressive, grading by the curve of previous Cody Stamann fights. This one, unfortunately, was not a next step for him. He still had just enough aggression to make it interesting, but he also, again, had to be convinced to be aggressive by sort of getting beaten up by a shockingly, as ever, a shockingly like creative and thoughtful Douglas Da Silva, who is he's just one of these fighters who looks like a total mess, but is really pretty sharp and crafty and makes good decisions in his fights.
Yeah. It was like Diego Ferreira's kind of, from a striking perspective, isn't it? He was, he was backing himself up into the fence a bunch, but he was throwing back counters with so much heat.
Yeah.
That Stamann was just like, and also, he was mixing up what the counters were. I think particularly like he was throwing the front kick to the body and he was attacking the low kicks. Which meant that Stamann just didn't. I think Stamann's he's just a fighter who just likes being safe.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's always been like mostly a control wrestler.
Yep.
And someone who's been sort of unwilling to spend his physical gifts, I think, in the pursuit of a win.
Yeah.
He obviously got kind of robbed of a position in the first round, which was not like super. It was a fairly competitive first round. I don't think Stamann was winning it, but then he got a takedown, and then Andrade kicked him in the head, and then they just restarted it on the feet.
Yeah, I don't know. These things seem to keep happening in recent cards, where the referees are. We got what we asked for. You know what I mean? It's a monkey's paw situation. It feels like referees are actually like stepping in a little more than they used to and trying to enforce the rules, and it turns out they don't know how.
Yeah.
Now we're getting the referees involved, and they keep fucking up the fights because they're MMA referees.
Yeah. So like Douglas Da Silva got a stern warning and also to escape from bottom position.
Yeah. No point deduction, but also...
And then went on to win the rest of the round, possibly off a Cody Stamann, who I think was probably actually somewhat hurt by the upkick.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very perplexing, very frustrating. I still think, I'm still interested in Cody Stamann. More than I kind of have been at any other point, because... he's clearly trying to be more aggressive. I think in this case, there is a specific technical difficulty, which is that, Drew Dober's defense isn't great, but he has developed more of a high guard and head movement defense, because that's what he needs to be an aggressive, swarming pocket puncher. And Cody Stamann, whose footwork is genuinely pretty good, that has always been his primary mode of defense. So it made it very difficult for him to sustain pressure and take advantage of those bad positions you were talking about. That Da Silva kept running himself into the fence, and then all he had to do was create a threat, and Stamann would hop away. And even if it was a short hop and he was trying to dip right back in, it was enough time for Da Silva to reset. And
also, I feel like Dober has at least been partially helped by, I tend to think of people in context of their training partners. I think a big change for Dober was regularly sparring with Justin Gaethje, because
absolutely,
it was you can't be a defensively minded low power guy against Justin Gaethje. It's just not safe.
Yeah,
you have to back him off. You have to sit down. You have to be prepared to get hit. You have to be prepared to get hit, because otherwise, paradoxically, he's going to hit you much more.
Yeah.
You can't back away from him.
Well, Cody Stamann used to fight out of Michigan. I don't think he does anymore, but if he goes back, that's pretty close to Canada. I think what you're saying is he should start training with Charles Jourdain.
Yeah.
right? that would teach him to be aggressive. You can't just let Charles Rodin run you over. Yeah, I just think, but I like this. I mean, I like that what Cody Stamann is trying. It's a lot more interesting than the extremely negative style he used to have, where he would just sort of sustain a solid performance and only win if the other guy badly fucked up. Now he is actually out there trying to create wins, and this was like close enough. I hold Douglas Da Silva in pretty high regard. Again, he's a tough guy to beat. His only losses really are to like elite fighters. And they tend to crush him because of all the weird, technical, like, idiosyncrasies of his game. Like, when he fought Petr Yan, like, this guy's trash. He's getting completely mauled. But when he fights anybody in the very broad middle of the pack, you see how, like, resourceful and crafty and creative he is, and how tough. I mean,
yeah, and he retains his distinction as the only person to actually genuinely scare Chito Vera.
Exactly, yeah. He's insane, and he throws everything with maximum heat. He picks his shots well, and if you start to roll him over, and you can't sustain it as brilliantly as Petr Yan, once you let Yan start to build on you, then he is going to come tearing back at you with a vengeance. So I still think a pretty good performance from Stamann, like,
yeah, and a great third round.
Oh my God. Yeah. He took his foot off the gas once he got Da Silva down, but he also like dropped him with a beautiful combination and a beautiful follow up, leading up to that, and clearly had come into that round thinking, I have to get this guy. I think honestly, his corner may have misled him because he sort of seemed to think that he had nabbed the first.
Yes. He didn't look like he was fighting for a finish.
Right. He seemed to think he needed to win the round, and once he had it in the bank, he was like, okay, good. And he was certainly surprised when they announced Da Silva as the winner. I think from our perspective, there was no question that Da Silva had won the previous two rounds. So,
yeah, again, I think he probably got hurt either by the up kick or just by something else, and he just had lost track of, which round was which.
That could be. Okay, well, that I think wraps up the quite interesting undercard. Unless you want to just simply mention that Jessica Rose Clark is a tragic case of she George R.R. Martin'd, relating to our pre-show discussion. She as her life went on, she fell into a sort of cyclical habit of getting in her own head and self-defeating behavior that has basically led to a series of progressively worse losses.
Yeah.
Where she just looks like she hates it. So honestly, love Jessie Jess. I've scouted for her before. She's got a great personality from everything I've seen. I think she should do whatever she wants, but I think she would enjoy doing something else more.
Yeah.
Like if it's fighting related.
I mean, or at least, take a significant break.
Yeah.
We've seen people go away and come back rejuvenated. Karolina Kowalkiewicz being the most,
that's a great example.
Who springs to mind. But yeah, it's her and Chase Sherman are just two fighters where you just look at them and you're like, man, this is not fun for you, is it?
Yeah. Maybe you get into a coaching role or maybe hook up with Karolina and, have some long Discord chats with her about how she managed to turn it around and regain her confidence, because she is in a hole, man, and she's probably, unfortunately for her, she's probably getting cut.
Yeah,
because at least,
well, and in some ways, it's not honestly not a bad thing.
No,
to get away from the pressure of the UFC, I think. Cause...
Yeah, it's getting to her.
But yeah, other than that, we've obviously got the news of Francis Ngannou signing with the PFL, which is frankly great.
Sure. I think he's not going to be debuting until 2024, and probably his prime is already over. So I don't know what that's going to look like. But as a business decision, it's awesome for him. It sounds like he got like a stake in the company too.
Yeah. So he's like the head of PFL Africa or whatever it is that they're going to try and do an expansion into. And the reason why I think this is particularly great is that it is agency in the truest sense. It's offering something that the UFC can't.
True.
Because
Yeah.
if he'd gotten a big deal, and it had just been, he's getting X amount of millions, he's, fame and money and so on, the UFC can offer these things, and particularly with the opaque, the opaque contracts. Everyone's just like, well, I'm sure, what's his face? Conor McGregor's earned so much money. I would be earning that. No matter how big his financial deal had gotten, fighters could have said to themselves, I could just get that in the UFC.
Right.
But the one thing that they can't get in the UFC is power.
That is 100% true.
And that is why I find it just very encouraging. And you can look at it from perspectives of like other traditionally exploitative career paths, like the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
Of how so many people kind of set standards. Like rappers, for example, but also I guess people like Taylor Swift, who have made it like a cool thing to have your own record label and be your own boss, rather than just being someone who gets fame and money.
Right.
I just hope more fighters see that and they think, you know what, the UFC can give me money and fame, but also they treat me like shit.
They do not respect me at all.
Or at least it comes, it's not necessarily being treated poorly. It's a position of, it's that if push came to shove.
Yes. They regard me as
I know
property.
exactly what would happen.
Yeah. They don't even regard me as an employee. They regard me as disposable property at the end of the day. Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly an interesting change. And I don't know, PFL is, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I've seen enough competing organizations just completely overspend and crash and burn, but whatever fentanyl manufacturing cabal is funding the PFL, they just have tons and tons of money, and they appear to be making pretty gigantic moves. I'm pretty sure I didn't get an update on this, but apparently they're buying Bellator.
Yeah, certainly sniffing around. Yeah.
So, it is kind of interesting to look at how the landscape might be changing in the not too distant future, as far as, top MMA promotions go. Having a stateside major competitor in the form of PFL who have now picked up, one of the UFC's most infamous losses in Francis Ngannou.
And, it's been so long since we've had much to be happier about from that kind of structural perspective.
Sure.
That, Ngannou's betting on himself. And, obviously there's many ways that can go wrong. Like you said, he's coming up to the end of his athletic prime. PFL could just go the way of Affliction or Strikeforce or any of, the numerous other organizations which have disintegrated. He's going to have to take when he takes a boxing fight, he can only really have one relevant boxing fight, in all honesty. Because he's almost certainly going to lose it.
He should fight Jake Paul.
Isn't Jake Paul a PFL investor?
Probably. I don't know.
I thought he might have been.
I don't know. All these weird little freaks, he's investing in everything. He's got his drink in the UFC and the Octagon. Probably Mr. Beast. It's probably Mr. Beast versus Jake Paul. Mr. Beast backs PFL. Jake Paul is now backing the UFC, while also pretending that he cares about UFC fighters, agency, and unions and things like that. It's great. It's a complicated world we live in, but it's good to see for Francis Ngannou. I'll take it, and I'm curious to see what happens next. And that concludes well, I probably shouldn't say this, but I still will. Surprisingly long episode of Heavy Hands, given the, sort of mixed quality of the cards we had to talk about. But there's a lot of little interesting stories running through them.
They were interesting stories more so than they were good fights in a lot of cases.
100%. But that is always, tracking fighters' development, is always my favorite thing to talk about. And there were a lot of instances of, why has this person hit a wall? Why are they still running even though their face is pressed up against the wall? And a lot of cases too of, or at least a few notable cases of people who have one way or the other, found ways to better themselves as competitors. Coming this weekend, we have, Vasily Lomachenko versus Devin Haney, which we did not preview right now. We have not done our research on that yet. We are going to watch it. We're going to watch some other, I've seen most of Lomachenko's fights. I'm going to watch some more Devin Haney. And next week, we're supposed to have fan favorite Kyle McLaughlin. So the guy in the comments who calls Phil the Oi Bruv, and he's going to have a really fun experience. Cause like, Phil got a new mic, which I think definitively proved that he is in fact posher than any of the listeners ever previously imagined. You can hear it.
I say.
You can hear it in the tones of his voice. And then we're going to have a genuine Oi Bruv, who, as I recall, has a really bad mic in Kyle McLaughlin. So you're going to get every little thing you've ever wanted out of the show next week. It'll be really fun to have Kyle on to talk about some boxing. And, looking forward to that. Make sure you check us out on Patreon. Check us out on Twitter, at Evil Greg Jackson, at Boxing Bush. We will talk to you next week, joined by our good friend Kyle. And until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.